Shalom Chaverim, I'm Steve Ben-Nun. You're watching Israeli News Live, and as I promised you guys, we were going to come back and the next day and talk more about Matthew chapter 15. Of course, I do apologize. I am one day off on getting back with you guys, but we're going to go back into Matthew 15, and also we're going to take a look at couple other places, Matthew chapter 4, as well as Matthew chapter 16. And I wanted to share these things with you because just really fascinating. And of course, chapter 15, chapter 16 about the Pharisees. And as we shared with you just a couple of days ago there, I was sharing with you how that something that seems to be overlooked, and that is that when Jesus is dealing with the Pharisees, he's dealing with their Talmudic laws, but oddly enough, his apostles, like in the case of Peter, he comes to him and he says to Jesus that, the Pharisees were offended. It really lets us know how much power and influence was held over the Jewish people of that day by the Pharisees, by their Talmudic traditions and beliefs. The people were really in bondage by this, even so much that the apostles themselves worried when it seemed that it be that Yeshua himself was offending the Pharisees. This is a little bit off subject here, chapter 4, but I thought it was worth looking at because although the Pharisees didn't know who Yeshua was, and they were often tempting him, trying to figure out who he was, Satan was doing the exact same thing in the wilderness journey, that 40 days there when he was tempting Yeshua. But he had a better idea of who Yeshua was, better than anyone. And I just happened to stumble across this when I was preparing this evening, and I wanted to share this with you because in the Hebrew Matthew, which is what we're looking at right now, if you look at the top of your screen, it's adamoh.org, adamoh.org, Tree of Life, and this is Shem Tov's Hebrew Matthew. The document is very old. There are a total of about 18 different fragments that make together the entire book of Matthew that's been preserved down by the different Jewish sages and teachers over the years there. And of course, these fragments are all over the world. You can find them. There's one, I know there's one in Great Britain. There's one in Spain, I believe it is, or no, I'm sorry, I take that back, it's Italy is where one of those are. And so I really like this particular book myself. It's just a great research tool, and it lets us see some deeper key points sometimes than that of the Greek translation that we have. Of course, the Greek being a copy of a copy, if we don't have an actual original that we can go by, and the same with this one, we don't have an original. But it's just kind of nice to see some of this sometimes written in Hebrew. And even so in chapter 4 here, I'm going to look at verse 6. We'll start with verse 5 there. I often think about this because the rabbinic community are the ones that preserve the Hebrew Matthew. And of course, the early church fathers spoke about Matthew writing in the Hebrew language. But some of these things here, obviously, you know that there was not necessarily a bias in preserving this document because clearly some of this verbiage here is not something that the Jewish rabbis would have ever been in favor of, and this being one of the examples. Let's start with verse 5, chapter 4. Then Satan took him to the holy city, placed him on a high point in all the temple, and said to him, "If you are God, jump down, for it is written, he has commanded his angels in regard to you to keep you in all your ways," etc. And Jesus answered him again, "You shall not tempt the Lord your God." So Satan took him to an exceedingly high mountain, showed him on all the kingdoms of the earth and their glory, and said to him, all these things I will give you if you bear your head to me. Then Jesus answered, go Satan, that is Satanas, for it is written, I will pray to the Lord, and him only you will serve. Now, the really interesting thing here is that Satan says to him, not like we have in the Greek, and I'm not saying that one is right or one has more authority than the other, I just find it interesting. But in the Hebrew version here, he says, if you are God. Literally, in the Hebrew, right across the page there, he actually says that very thing. Veyomer Eliav, which means, and he said to him, Im Elohim. Now, by the way, I know you guys have heard me teach about the word im before in Daniel, and I said it means with. It doesn't mean upon or anything like that. It means with. But that's spelled ayin mem. In this case here, it's aleph mem. And in the case of aleph mem, it does mean if. Okay? If Elohim. Elohim is if you are God. And that is interesting. And of course, we know now Yeshua quotes from an Old Testament passage when he answers him. But at the same time, if you think about it, Satan is asking him, if you are God, jump down, for it is written, he has commanded his angels in regard to you to keep you in all your ways, etc. Jesus answered him, right? Verse 7. Jesus answered him, Ve'ya'an Eliav Yeshua Shanit Lo Tanasa Et. And the Hey Yod Yod is the abbreviation for the divine name. This is the way they were doing it in the Hebrew Matthew here, but it's actually the Yod He Vav He, the Tetragrammaton. So it would be Yehovah Elokeach. So you shall not tempt the Lord your God. Now, there's been a lot of debate on that. Won't go into that right now, but I think it's self-exclamatory. Now, let's drop down to chapter 15. As I mentioned to you, I was going to go back into chapter 15, so I want to do that again with you here. And, I know we've been doing a lot of teachings here, and not as much news right now. I know they had the presidential debates for the Democrats. They've been going through there. Seems like Tulsi Gabbard, from what I heard, really has buried Miss Harris there, and not saying what side anybody should do or stand for. I personally voted for Yeshua, so I'm not interested in all these other things. And of course, I know there was some kind of shooting that took place out west there. But we'll look at news tomorrow night. These are just some things that I really felt like would be a blessing for you. So anyway, the sages and Pharisees came to Jesus and said to him, why do your disciples transgress the ordinances of antiquity by not washing their hands before eating? Now, it's so important to note, because in the Hebrew Matthew, it's a little more clear than the Greek Matthew, because he says the ordinances of antiquity. Now, we know from the Greek Matthew, he talks about the washing of hands and things like that. So therefore, we know it's Talmudic law. It is what the rabbis call the oral Torah. In this case here, it's a little bit more obvious he's talking about the oral Torah, because he calls it ordinance of antiquity. And it goes on, Yeshua said to them, why do you transgress the words of God? Because of your ordinances. Let you know for sure now it's their particular oral law. For God said, honor your father and your mother, and he who smites his father and mother will surely be put to death. But you say, whatever a word a man shall say to his father or his mother in regard to any donation he might give him as a sinner, this iniquity itself will be made void to him. So he does not honor his father and his mother. And you despise the word of God by your ordinances. Woe, hypocrites! Behold, Isaiah prophesied concerning you and said, thus the Lord said, because this people has come near with their mouth and honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. And their reverence toward me, which is taught, is the commandments of men. So see, he's not just limiting it to the washing of hands before eating, but he's letting you know the only reverence they have towards God is through the commandments of men. In other words, the only thing that the Pharisees and Sadducees were doing was running around giving God praise for some kind of oral Torah that God never wrote in the first place. So think about it. Yeshua called to the crowds and said to them, I like it when he does that. He calls to the crowds. In other words, he doesn't just speak to them, but now he addresses the whole group. Hear and consider. That which enters through the mouth does not soil the man, but that which goes out of the mouth soils the man. In other words, the food he eats isn't causing him a problem. What's causing him the problem is those Talmudic laws coming out of his mouth. That's what soils him, right? Then his disciples came to him and said to him, no, the Pharisees were perplexed by this word. Actually, in the Greek it says they were offended by this word. Yeshua answered them, every plant which my Father who is in heaven did not plant will be destroyed. Leave them alone, because the blind are leading the blind, and if a blind man leads another who is blind, both will fall into a pit. You know, that's pretty bold, straightforward. Yeshua is not mincing words, and he's not playing church. He's telling you exactly who they are. Right? Fascinating. Now, I want to jump down real quick. We'll go out of chapter 15. I want to go into 16, because it continues the thought, and I think it's important. He says, sages and Pharisees came to him, tempting him to teach them some sign from heaven. And again, the Hebrew Matthew really brings this to a place in its verbiage that I find fascinating myself. Yeshua answered them, hypocrites! You say in the evening, tomorrow will be a clear day because the sky is red. And in the morning you say, today will be rain because the sky is dark. If so, you know the law regarding the appearance of the sky, but you do not know the law regarding the times. The offspring of evildoers ask for a sign, but no sign will be given them except the sign of Jonah the prophet. Then he was separated from them and went away. This got me. See, in the Greek Matthew, we don't see him say the offspring of evildoers ask for a sign. It says, an evil and adulterous generation seeketh after a sign. But because we have it worded this way, the offspring of evildoers, and then we think back as, an evil and what? Adulterous generation seeketh after a sign. Oh my gosh, do you realize what he is saying? I mean, to me, this is the very, oh gosh. Okay, guys, I got to show you something now. This is exciting to me right here, what we're looking at. Let me see. Let me just jump over here real quick. All right, I want to take you to Matthew here. All right, and where were we at there? We were in Matthew 16. Right, and we are at verse 4. So let's go over here. We'll just use the, since we're doing a screen recording, you guys can see this a little bit better. We're going to click on Matthew 16 here. We're going to go back up here to verse 4. I want you to see how it's worded there. A wicked and adulterous generation seeketh after a sign. Why does he call them an adulterous generation? Remember, he said that they are vipers. In the Greek, generation of vipers. Literally, in the Greek word that is used there is a family of vipers. Just like in the Hebrew, it is the seed of vipers. Why then does he call them a wicked and adulterous generation? Because I believe that they are the children of those Kohanim and Levites that under the Babylonian exile, when they had failed to keep God's commandment. And we found out from the book of Ezra that they went and they had mingled the holy seed. It's in the book of Ezra. Let's pull it up just so we have it here, right? They mingled the holy seed with the peoples of the land. Now, those people of that land was not, and I want to make sure we really understand this right now, this was not speaking of the Babylonians, because in Ezra chapter 9 we find out that they were the Hittite, Perizzite, Jebusite, etc. Right here, Ezra 9, verse 1. Now when these things were done, the princes drew near unto me, saying, the people of Israel and the priests and the Levites have not separated themselves from the peoples of the lands, doing according to their abominations, even of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, and the Jebusites, and the Ammonites, and the Moabites, and the Egyptians, and the Amorites. For they have taken of their daughters for themselves and for their sons, so that the holy seed have been mingled themselves with the peoples of the lands. Yea, the hand of the princes and rulers have been first in this faithlessness. Adulterous generation is what Yeshua called them. Adulterous generation seeketh after a sign, and there shall no sign be given unto it but the sign of Jonas, the sign of the prophet Jonas. Think about it. You know, I think the most important part of what we're seeing right there is that they are. I mean, we are seeing yet another scripture that proves that they are a Nephilim race, is what they are. Okay, now we'll continue to look at this real quick here, just briefly here. Offspring of evildoers ask for a sign. Would be no sign would be given them except the sign of Jonah the prophet. Then he separated from them and went away. And when Yeshua came to the seashore, he told his disciples to prepare bread. Then he entered a boat. This is the important part. We're going to close with this. With his disciples. But the disciples forgot and did not bring any bread. Remember, Yeshua what? He's the bread of life, right? He is the Word of God. All right, just keep that in mind. They didn't bring any bread. And he told his disciples to prepare bread, and they entered into a boat with his disciples, but the disciples forgot and did not bring any bread. And Yeshua said to them, have you a little, you have little understanding, who think that you have no bread. Do you not remember the 5 loaves and the 4,000? Oh, I'm sorry, I must have missed something here. Let me back up. When Yeshua came to the seashore, he told his disciples to prepare bread. Then he entered into a boat with the disciples, but the disciples forgot and did not bring any bread. And Yeshua said to them, you have little understanding. Who think that you have no bread? Do you not remember the 5 loaves, 4,000 men? How many seas were left over? Therefore you should understand that I am not speaking of natural loaves, but I am saying to you that you should beware of the behavior of the Pharisees and Sadducees. Jesus went on into the land of Syria, that is Caesarea, and the land of Philippi, called Philippos, and asked his disciples, saying, what do men say about me? Now the point being, and if we look at this in the Greek, he said that it was to beware, when he talked about beware of the leaven of the Pharisees, it was to beware of the doctrine of the Pharisees, which is what? Oral law. Talmudic law is exactly what it is. These things are just fascinating to me, friends. Listen, if it's a blessing to you, we thank you for your love and your support to the ministry. We can't do it without you, so I do want to thank those that do support the work that we do, whether it be with prayer or your giving. You can do so on our website, israelinewslive.org. And on I'll just share with you there so you know exactly how to get there, israelinewslive.org. Takes you